At 0900 hours in the Gulf of Aden, a boat full of armed men was rapidly approaching the USS Gonzales, AK-47s and RPGs visible from the bridge. These pirates thought they'd hit the score of a lifetime. Instead, they were now toe-to-toe with an Arleigh Burke-class destroyer and a Ticonderoga-class cruiser, the combined firepower of a small nation's entire navy. The skiff, a large diesel-powered mothership towing two smaller gasoline attack boats, was pushing across open water at 15 knots, 3,000 yards, and closing. The Gonzales's bridge watch classified the contact as suspect almost immediately. The towed attack boats were the first red flag. Legitimate fishermen don't drag fast boats behind them like trailers at a NASCAR race. But suspect doesn't mean hostile. The Gulf of Aden is full of weird-looking boat configurations. Fishermen tow skiffs to different grounds. Smugglers haul cargo between ports. And sometimes a boat that looks wrong is just a boat that looks wrong. In these waters, you investigate before you escalate. You can't shoot every contact that makes you nervous, or you'd run out of ammunition before lunch and start an international incident before dinner. The officer of the deck passed the word to the Combat Information Center, CIC, and launched a rigid-hull inflatable boat, RIB, to intercept. Standard procedure. Boarding teams do this dozens of times a month in these waters. Motor out, pull alongside, check paperwork, check cargo, wave goodbye. It's routine the way a traffic stop is routine. You do it constantly. It almost never goes bad. And the one time it does, you're standing next to the problem with no backup plan. The RIB motored away from the Gonzales toward the approaching contact. 5 guys in a rubber boat with rifles, set to politely ask a suspect vessel what it's up to. The naval equivalent of knocking on a stranger's door at midnight with a clipboard and a flashlight, except the stranger might have an RPG. At this point, the contact was just another blip on a long patrol. Probably fishermen, maybe smugglers. Either way, a 20-minute job. Behind them, the Gonzales continued tracking the skiff on radar. Ahead of them, 2,000 yards of open water and a boat that might be anything. But the Gonzales wasn't the only one watching. An MH-60 Seahawk was already airborne, standard overwatch for counter-piracy ops. The helicopter had been orbiting since before the skiff appeared on radar, and it was the first asset close enough to get a real look. The sensor operator swung the FLIR turret to the contact, and what came back on the thermal display changed everything. Not fishing nets, not cargo, weapons. RPGs propped against the gunnel, their warheads glowing slightly warmer than the surrounding fiberglass. Kalashnikovs across laps, men loading magazines, not casting lines. The crew chief counted heads, 12. While the sensor operators zoomed tighter, cataloging every detail radar couldn't provide. How the men were positioned, where the weapons were stacked, how the tow lines to the attack boats were rigged for quick release. One pull, and those boats would be independent, maneuvering on their own power. One skiff full of pirates is an intercept. 3 independent boats with weapons is an ambush. The Seahawks report hit CIC like a brick. Not a suspect contact, a confirmed hostile force. 12 armed men with RPGs and automatic weapons closing at 15 knots, now 800 yards from the Gonzales. And the RIB, their boarding team, their guys, were already out there. Already between the warships and the threat. Already motoring toward 12 men carrying weapons designed to punch through armored vehicles. The bridge called the RIB. Come about! Return to ship now! The coxswain acknowledged, swung the helm hard over, and the outboard choked, sputtered, died. Salt water, fuel contamination, a vapor lock in the fuel line. It doesn't matter which. Ribs are tough boats, but their engines run in the most corrosive environment on Earth. Mechanical failures are so routine that every boarding team has a story about getting stranded mid-patrol. Usually it's an inconvenience. Today, it's about to become a crisis. The coxswain cycled the engine. Nothing. Cycled again. The starter ground, but the motor wouldn't catch. 5 American sailors were now stuck on the water, drifting on current, directly between a closing pirate skiff and 2 warships that had just learned the men in that skiff were carrying rocket-propelled grenades. At 15 knots, the skiff was eating 100 feet of ocean every 4 seconds. The math was brutal, and it was getting worse by the heartbeat. 1,500 yards. And then the tactical picture tripled. The mothership altered course, not away from the warships, but toward them. Then the 2 smaller attack boats cut their tow lines. Gasoline engines coughed to life. Both boats peeled away in opposite directions, one angling toward the Gonzales's port quarter, the other swinging wide toward Cape St. George. One contact became 3, spreading across the surface plot like a hand opening. Inside the CIC, radar operators called out new bearings as fast as the contacts separated, 200 yards now. The pirates were running a textbook swarm. Come from multiple angles, split the defender's attention, overwhelm the response. It's how they take merchant ships. A container ship has one bridge and one panicked crew trying to watch every direction at once. But these pirates were now attempting that tactic against 2 warships with overlapping radar coverage, 2 CICs, and enough weapon stations to handle a squadron of incoming fighters. The maritime equivalent of trying to carjack a police cruiser. Except the police cruiser had a problem nobody had anticipated. 1,000 yards. The RIB was parked directly in the gap between the approaching mothership and the warships, stuck in the open. No armor, no overhead cover, nothing between those sailors and what would come next except salt air and a hull. Inside the CIC, the watch officers were staring at a surface plot that looked like a nightmare. 3 hostile contacts closing from different vectors. 1 friendly contact sitting motionless in the middle of all of it, and a shrinking bubble of ocean that was about to become a shooting gallery. The Gonzales couldn't shoot without risking her own people. The RIB couldn't retreat because it couldn't move. And the pirates were closing the distance at a rate that turned minutes into seconds. On the RIB, the boarding team was doing the only thing they could, trying to restart the engine while watching armed men close the distance. The coxswain was cycling the outboard between scans of the approaching skiff. Pull the choke, hit the starter, nothing. Reset. Try again. Every failed attempt ate 4 more seconds. 4 more seconds meant another 100 feet of ocean gone. The other 4 sailors had their M16s pointing outward, not because they planned to start a gunfight from a rubber boat against 12 men with RPGs, but because the option of not being ready was worse. 800 yards. The Seahawk pilot called down a final update from overhead. Men in the mothership were moving to firing positions, RPG up on a shoulder, Kalashnikovs braced against the gunwale. The sensor operator had been watching the same thermal picture for 3 minutes and knew exactly what preparation for an attack looked like. This wasn't posturing. These men were seconds from shooting. On the Gonzales's bridge, the officer of the deck was watching the range tick down and running out of options at the same rate. The Seahawk couldn't engage. Helicopters on counter-piracy ops don't carry weapons loaded for surface targets as standard configuration. A multi-million-dollar aircraft orbiting overhead with a perfect view of the enemy, and the most lethal thing aboard was the sensor operator's coffee mug. The Cape St. George was maneuvering to get an angle, but the RIB was still sitting right in the middle of the geometry. Every solution required the RIB to not be where it was, and the RIB wasn't going anywhere. 600 yards. The pirates saw the RIB sitting motionless on the water, altered course directly toward it, and accelerated. And this is where the pirates accidentally discovered something nobody in the Pentagon had ever planned for. Every primary weapon system on both ships was useless. The Mark 45 gun on the Gonzales's forecastle lobbed 70 LB shells at targets 12 nautical miles away, enough firepower to send these pirates to the moon, skip them off the atmosphere, and bring them back just to do it again. At this range, the gun physically could not depress low enough to fire. It was pointing over their heads. The vertical launch cells, 96 between the 2 ships, loaded with missiles worth roughly $150 million combined, needed thousands of meters just to arm. A standard missile fired at this range would scream over the pirates and detonate somewhere in the Indian Ocean, a $2.1 million firework. And the Phalanx CIWS, the automated last-ditch close-in weapon system. Picture a 20mm Gatling gun that fires 75 rounds per second, mounted on a swivel turret that thinks for itself. No human pulls the trigger. The system's radar detects an incoming missile, calculates the intercept point, and fills that point in space with a wall of tungsten, all in less time than it takes you to blink. It's the last thing a cruise missile sees before it becomes shrapnel confetti. But Phalanx was designed to hit objects moving at twice the speed of sound at ranges measured in miles. It doesn't have a setting for guy in a dinghy with a Kalashnikov. At this range, you could press every button in CIC, and the only thing you'd accomplish is wasting electricity. These ships were built to fight a blue water naval war at 60 miles. The pirates had stumbled inside the one engagement envelope where $1 billion of Aegis technology was less useful than a shotgun from Walmart. The answer was 50 cals and personal weapons. That's it. $1 billion warship reduced to machine guns. But even the machine guns had a problem. 2 warships about to engage the same target at close range with unguided weapons, while their own RIB, stuck out in the water, engine out, 5 sailors with no cover, sat directly in the crossfire. No fire control computer handles this. No automated system deconflicts machine gun fire at knife fight range with friendlies in the splash zone. The TAOs on both ships had to carve up a tiny patch of ocean into firing lanes on the tactical net in real time, voice to voice, while pirates were putting rounds into their holes. $2 billion of networked combat technology, the most sophisticated naval warfare system ever designed. And the solution to this problem was two guys on a radio figuring it out the old-fashioned way, like air traffic controllers at the world's most dangerous airport. The Gonzales takes this sector, Cape St. George takes that one. Nobody fires into the RIB's quadrant. And the RIB's quadrant wasn't a fixed point on a chart. It was a drifting rubber boat with no engine, shifting position with every current and every wake from the closing skiff. The gunners would have to track a moving safe zone while firing at a moving target at a range where the two were close enough to overlap. Miss your lane by 2 degrees and you're hitting an American warship. Drop your elevation by 3 and you're putting rounds into an American rubber boat. The margin for error was the width of a hand at arm's length. The captain faced a decision that would have taken 30 minutes of JAG consultation in peacetime. The rules of engagement allow deadly force for hostile act or hostile intent. Hostile act is easy. Someone shoots at you, you shoot back. The paperwork writes itself. Hostile intent is a gray zone. Nobody's fired yet, but 12 armed men with RPGs are bearing down on your ship, ignoring radio warnings, accelerating toward a disabled RIB full of your sailors. Every indicator short of pulling the trigger. The question isn't whether these men are hostile. The question is whether you wait for the RPG to confirm it. And if you wait, the first round might hit a rubber boat with 5 Americans in it. Shoot now on intent, and you're initiating fire with your own people in the crossfire and no hostile act on record. Wait for the act, and the act might be the thing that takes out your boarding team. There's no clean option. There's only which risk you're willing to carry for the rest of your career. The call came fast. The RIB stays where it is. Towing them out would take minutes they didn't have, and any rescue boat would be driving straight through the pirates' line of fire. The safest place for that crew, paradoxically, was the most dangerous spot in the Gulf of Aden. That's the kind of tactical math that looks insane on paper, but makes perfect sense when every alternative is worse. Weapon stations. Engage the mothership. Watch your arcs. Watch the RIB. The 50 cal gunners stepped up to their mounts on the weather deck. No CIC protecting them. No armored bulkheads. Open air. A splinter shield that wouldn't stop an RPG fragment. And a clear view of men shooting rockets in their direction. An RPG doesn't need a direct hit. A near miss sprays shrapnel across the deck at thousands of feet per second. And every man on those mounts knew exactly what that does to someone standing behind a quarter-inch steel plate. The gunners racked the charging handles, swung the barrels onto the skiff and went to work. 200 yards. At that range, you don't aim a 50 cal, you point it. The Gonzales and the Cape St. George opened up simultaneously from coordinated sectors. The sound hit first. Not the sharp crack of a rifle, but a deep rhythmic hammering you feel in your sternum before you hear it with your ears. The first burst from the Gonzales' starboard mount walked across the water, a line of white splashes marching toward the skiff like stepping stones, and punched into the mothership's hull below the waterline, through the fiberglass, through the wooden frames, and out the other side. The Cape St. George gunners hit the same target from a different angle. Rounds converging from 2 directions at once. At 200 yards, a 50 caliber round does to fiberglass what a bowling ball does to a paper plate. Every piece of cover the pirates crouched behind was being perforated from the opposite side simultaneously. The mothership was disintegrating in real time. Rounds punched through the engine housing. The diesel came apart in a spray of metal fragments and black smoke. The hull was collecting holes faster than the Gulf of Aden could fill them. The RIB crew was still in the gap, stuck out in the open. 50 cal rounds screaming overhead. RPG and AK fire coming back the other direction. But these sailors weren't just riding it out. They had M16s and a clean line of sight. They opened fire, a third stream of rounds into a skiff that was already coming apart. The Gonzales to starboard, the Cape St. George to port, the RIB in the center. American sailors in an engineless rubber boat voluntarily joining a firefight between 2 warships and a pirate crew with RPGs. That is a certain kind of insane that doesn't show up on a Navy recruiting poster, but probably should. Then a singled 50 cal tracer from the Gonzales found a 55-gallon fuel drum strapped to the mothership's deck. Diesel needs heat and pressure to ignite. A 50 cal tracer provides both. The round punched through the thin steel at 2,910 feet per second. The phosphorus tip ignited the fuel vapor above the liquid line. The drum ruptured. Burning diesel sprayed across the deck into the bilge, across every surface of a boat that was already shattered. Fire spread faster than men could move away from it. Then it found the gasoline stores meant for the attack boats. Gasoline doesn't need convincing. It goes up fast, hot, and all at once. The skiff became a pillar of black smoke and orange flame, visible for miles. The Seahawk crew watched the thermal display white out, the entire vessel brighter than anything else on the Gulf of Aden. The two attack boats watched their mothership turn into a bonfire from less than a mile away. For about 30 seconds, nobody moved. Then the math hit them. No mothership meant no fuel, no food, no navigation, no way back to the Somali coast. 300 miles of open Indian Ocean. They were sitting in gasoline-powered skiffs with range measured in dozens of miles, not hundreds. The Cape St. George was right there. Her 50 cals were still manned, barrels hot. The Seahawk circled overhead, feeding positions to CIC, and the RIB crew still had their M16s trained on the nearest skiff. Weapons went down, hands went up. The first smart decision anyone on the Somali side had made all day. 12 pirates captured, 12 men who woke up that morning expecting to retire off one hijacking, now sitting zip-tied on the deck of a Ticonderoga-class cruiser surrounded by 122 vertical launch cells, millions of dollars in guided missiles, radar systems that can track a baseball at 165 miles, the most advanced naval combat system ever built, and not one piece of it could have stopped them 20 minutes ago. All it took was a broken outboard motor to turn the world's most powerful navy into a gunfight at a gas station. Bye for now.